9:38 on the Talk of the Town.
Push it through the tape all the way.
It's probably on the playlist there, Claudia. Never Surrender there by Corey Hart. And that's kind of the theme, I think, from a text message coming in for you, Claudia. AARP has been hijacked by the Dems. Party fake survey numbers. Go, Claudia, it says. So, referring to the AARP poll that we discussed earlier this morning. So, a little fun there coming in from our listeners.
They're sending me stuff, too.
Are they? What, the AARP?
Already?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's the former resident. Mm-hmm. Claudia, wanted to just bring this up, and I know that there may be a point to go further into this down the road, but I know you and Anthony Brindisi were in the OD for an article concerning the environment and your positions on all of those environmental issues. But generally speaking, there's a lot of news about the Trump administration's efforts to try to roll back some of Obama's environmental regulations. Mm-hmm. You're talking about proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan, which would have imposed the first carbon dioxide limits on power plants, reviewing standards for limiting carbon dioxide emissions from new, modified, and reconstructed power plants. There's issues with the requirement of oil and gas companies to report methane emission leaks. So there are a whole bunch of issues concerning methane and clean air and clean water. So when people might, I know you sat here and you said you're not for dirty water or dirty air. Mm-hmm. So when someone might make the position, well, these regulations are in place to try to protect the air and try to protect the water. So what is going to be the ultimate outcome of rolling those back, other than to make the water and make the air less clean? So what do you see as something about this that the left and the Democrats are missing when they try to suggest that this is going to be bad for the environment?
Well, a lot of the regulations that are in place under our claim that they're making our air cleaner and our water cleaner, but let's look at Flint, Michigan. Remember the pollution of the Colorado River? Those were all done under an EPA that was supposedly keeping our water clean and our air clean. I think we need to regulate the environment and players in the environment, but we also have to be reasonable about the regulations and make sure they make sense and they're not just coming out of a very left-wing environmental lobby group, which makes money on it. You know, for example, like when Anthony Brindisi stood up and challenged the water in Utica, it turned out the company that he was citing was a company that actually, makes money off of finding minuscule changes in or parts of, accusing the Utica Water Authority of somehow not complying with the water standards.
You got Niskayuna now saying they've spent their $48 million in debt, most of that because of the last 2 years. They spend that money on trying to upgrade the town's wastewater treatment plant, which was another situation out in Niskayuna with their drinking water.
Right, that's actually not here. But what I'm getting at with this whole thing with the water is it turns out the company that Anthony Brindisi was getting the data from is a company that goes out and tries to sell people water filters. So they go out and they scare people and say, your water's bad based on certain things we're looking at. And it turned out the Utica Water Authority actually not only do they responded, not only do they report I think it's almost on a weekly basis what the water contents are, mm-hmm. but they're also separately regulated by another environmental agency. So there's a reasonableness here. I just look at, for example, carbon emissions. Now that there is more natural gas has replaced more of the coal-fired plants and a lot of the nuclear power issues, we've seen our carbon emissions go down. But yet fracking, hydraulic fracturing that is horizontal, and I'm not talking about vertical because we still have about 14,000 permitted wells in the state of New York. The original oil and gas ever discovered in this nation were discovered in Fredonia, in New York State, not Texas, not somewhere else. We remain the only state that doesn't allow horizontal hydraulic fracturing. But yet, in some ways, now New York City has gone from coal-fired powering their grid to natural gas, but that natural gas is coming from Pennsylvania because the pipeline goes from Pennsylvania. So, you have to some of these people, they've come in to see me, and I certainly want to keep our environment as clean as possible, but I also have to live within reason. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, we shouldn't have any oil and gas. People should not drive cars. Gas should be $6 a gallon. And you should have hay bales insulating your house and solar panels and a windmill. But, some of those aren't the most efficient ways to power our current needs for energy and our grid to operate efficiently to compete with the rest of the world. while China continues to pollute and Asia continues to pollute. I mean, when you go to China or you go to Asia, you know, I did that this year. I went to India as well. I mean, the advice is do not eat anything that's not cooked, because of what they have no regulations like we do. So I don't think we should go to that extreme.
So you need some level of
regulation.
regulation.
Yeah, we need a level of regulation that is reasonable, not to the point where American companies are actually, we're not efficient.
Well, businesses, I think to the extent you can say there that sometimes over-regulation can hurt businesses and make it counter cost effective for them to make profits and move forward. But is it on the same level? Is it also not cost effective for them and not a good business model to completely disregard any point of keeping the environment clean? Like if a business just said we're just gonna,
but that's not true. That's not what's happening. There's certain emission standards that we think are reasonable, that we can move in that direction. We can totally cripple the economy of the United States against other players, like we did with the Paris Accords, which President Trump rightly moved out of, where all the upfront loading of the money being paid was all by the United States. We were forced. We had to comply, just like ever since the Kyoto Accords were in Japan. Ever since we pulled out of that, our carbon emission standards went down. We actually have less carbon emissions than we did before.
And I think our cars and manufacturers of cars, that they see that's the general trend that the country is moving into, that they still, even if you remove those regulations, they still want to move in that direction of cutting emissions.
Right. I just think there's a point where there's reasonables, and then there's this hyper environmentalism that is really a political movement more than it is about our environment. They claim that they have the higher moral ground with science, but in fact science continues to prove them that they're not right on everything. But I still care very much about the environment. I think we need to be careful. I mean, I've been in other countries where there's just no regard for the environment. We do a lot, and so I think in that sense, you know, there's a lot of positives there, but I also think that you can go overboard. Why would we put the United States at a huge disadvantage in the Paris Accords? I think the president would like to renegotiate that so that the billions and billions of dollars that the U.S. pays up front and all our compliance that's up front, why aren't we in the same standard? Why aren't we on a level playing field with China and India and other countries that are polluting? They're not paying into the Paris Accords. They weren't required to comply with environmental standards, yet they were eating our lunch on the commerce side, you know, with selling goods and services to us, not complying with environmental standards. And so I think it should be a level playing field, and I think the president's going to try to make that happen.
Claudia Tenney, Congresswoman, joining us here on the Talk of the Town, and we're going to take a break here shortly. But this is a two-part question. I don't think we got into it. This is from a listener, and you can respond. Some serious stuff and some fun stuff here as well. I don't understand why Medicare is always cut first. My parents are elderly and work their whole life, and now they are penalized when they have a limited income. But yet, people who are able to work and are on welfare and get Medicaid get the complete coverage. How is that fair when they haven't worked a day in their lives and they're entitled to that? Question mark. Now, that's the first part. The listener then went on to say, tell Claudia that I agree with her about Chris Isaak's song. That was always my favorite video and song. Every woman dreamed about being on the beach with that man. So there you go. You have the same listener. But I don't know if you want to address the Medicare.
Now are we going?
No, we can address it now before we go to the break.
Yeah, it's the perfect question, because we have actually tried to help people on Medicare. We gave a raise to people in Social Security, which they didn't get through what they call COLA, or cost of living adjustments.
Gotcha.
Those weren't happening to people on Social Security. I actually think we need to raise the benefits on Social Security. I think people need to get more. The problem we have today is that we're seeing a huge deficit because we literally took, it was over $800 billion from Medicare, which is earned by people that work, and put it into Medicaid.
Right.
Exactly. And we hurt senior citizens. I can't tell you how many people I come across every day. Perfect example. A woman came up to me. Her mom, family business was a dairy farm, and dairy farmers have been through a terrible time. We need to, even though the new Mexico-Canada-U.S. trade agreement is better for dairy farmers, we still haven't solved a lot of the problems. Dealing with wages, dealing with workers, dealing with taxes, all those things are hurting dairy farmers. But this woman, her family business was a dairy farm. They have a lot of land. They have very high taxes. Her husband has passed away. She's got to live on $800 a month in Social Security. That's just not enough to live on.
Right.
This woman needs assistance. She should have, after all her years of work and the money she paid in as a dairy farmer into Social Security, she should be getting more. But because someone who never worked or someone who isn't working is getting Medicaid. We need to get people back to work, because as more people work, and we're seeing that happening in more places than New York, unfortunately, as more and more people are getting back to work, that's more money